Business news now. We're talking about leasehold properties this morning. Do people know what they're buying into? Because it always sounds like a good idea, doesn't it?
Sometimes it might look like it's cheaper to get the leasehold rather than the freehold, but it's not always like that. Thanks very much. Yeah, morning to you. Yeah, we've heard today from estate agents that are now calling for an investigation into how so many people have ended up only owning the lease on their home rather than the freehold. So let me explain the difference, because if you buy a leasehold property, you own the building, but crucially, you don't own the land that it's built on. The land is owned by a freeholder. And so once your lease runs out, ownership will pass back to them. It also means that you'll have to pay an annual ground rent. You might need to get permission to make any changes to the property. And sometimes you might have to pay a fee to a managing agent. Now, there are 1.4 million of these types of houses in England, and that's costing homeowners through rising ground rents and big unexpected charges. So much so, the government banned leaseholds on nearly all new build houses, and it stopped funding new ones. But the problem is, 45% of people, according to this survey, didn't know they were actually buying a leasehold property until it was too late. 2/3 of them now say that they regret that purchase and are struggling to sell on their house. So let's talk about this with Mark Hayward, who's Chief Executive of Propertymark. It represents estate agents and carried out the research. Mark, morning.
Good morning.
I mean, it's pretty stark, those figures, isn't it? People regret making that decision to buy and struggling to sell. How did we get to this position?
I think people, first of all, they buy with their heart, not their head. But they need to be advised, and normally a lawyer would advise them, or indeed the person that is selling the property should advise them, should draw attention to the fact that it is leasehold. It's very evident from our survey, and we talked to over 1,100 people who bought a new home over the last 10 years, that that's not the case. So they were sort of almost lured into the buying of the property because it was available. Yep. Housing stock was limited, so here's a nice house, I want to buy it. They would assume if it was an apartment or a flat that it was leasehold, but people don't actually link houses, homes, with leasehold.
Who's to blame for this? Is this the builders saying, oh, I know a way of making a quick buck, I'll get a bit of money, and it's consistent income, isn't it? Because if you're paying ground rent, you're paying fees and agency fees, all that sort of thing, they get a consistent income. Or is it the buyer for actually not being aware, not educating themselves that there is a difference?
Certainly, if you look at the statistics that we have, over 50% of those buyers were first-time buyers. Right. They're termed a vulnerable group. They've never bought before. They don't know any better, so they haven't been alerted to the fact that it is a leasehold property. So far as the house builder is concerned, it's an additional source of income. In some instances, they're selling the freehold of the property immediately. Legal completion takes place. That gives them a capital gain, and it's bought by investors, and by the very fact that they are investors, they're going to be seeking an income and an increment in the value going forward.
So aside from the fact you don't actually own the land that your house is built on, what else does it stop you doing?
Well, it doesn't stop you, but if you want to make any alterations to the property, the freeholder will charge you. And we've done some research on this, and we've got, for instance, if you want to change the blinds in your kitchen, £491 just for consent. If you want to change your carpets, £841.
This is a scandal, isn't it?
I think it's a scandal that's been swept under the carpet. It's now just coming to light, and the other issue is that people we have who bought these properties in the last 10 years are actually trapped.
I was going to say, if you're in this position, what can you do? If you're struggling to sell, is there any way you can get your hands on that freehold?
Technically, yes, and in some instances, purchasers were told the freehold would only cost them £2,000 or £3,000. That's not the case, because the freehold's already been sold to an investor. So how do you buy that back? Yep. They'd want a capital gain on that, even if they wanted to sell it. So you are trapped, and it really is. It's a scandal because we've got consumers who can't sell their property.
Yeah, Mark, thanks for highlighting all that. I'm sure we'll talk about this again because, as you say, it does feel like it's a scandal. Mark, thanks very much. Mark Hayward there from Chief Executive of Propertymark. We'll talk about that a little more a little later.